Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It is time once again for my weekly chatty catch up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chit chat and catch up on my week. And it was another good reading week. I feel like I accomplished a lot of things I wanted to, including, firstly, taking off that spring into series that I have been ongoing focusing on with The Queen of Poisons, the third in the Marlowe Murder Club mysteries. So I read the second last month and went on to the third this month, and I really enjoyed it. This series has charmed me so much because of the three characters that are at its center, and that continued to be true here. So this is set in contemporary England. It's following these three women who are middle-aged or older, pretty much. One's a vicar's wife, one's a dog walker, and the other is a retiree / crossword setter, a much older lady, elderly woman. And Judith Potts, the elderly woman, is such a great central figure for this because she brings everybody together and she doesn't take any guff and she doesn't listen to what she's supposed to do. She doesn't follow the rules, really. And I love that about her. But this one, it felt like they went into a little bit cheesy territory. It also felt like this went into tropes a lot more for standard, like more cozy mysteries where the cheese factor was really ramped up. And I also felt like I was seeing things I had seen before. In particular, it felt very familiar to the Thursday Murder Club, the first of that series. Because we have this mix of, there's like a podcaster involved, an older man who has died, who is very loved by everyone, it seems, and wealthy. And then a building development is prominent and central to the plot. So it feels like all of these things bundled together had a lot of similarity and vibes to the Thursday Murder Club. So I don't know if I love that, which I have very much liked the Thursday Murder Club, but that being so in line with things I've seen before removed the joy of the freshness that this series has kind of brought me. So I enjoyed it, but it didn't blow me away, which is kind of disappointing coming off of the previous two, which in particular the second I really, really liked. So I don't know, I feel a little bit mixed about this particular entry, but I definitely intend to continue on with the series because it has been such an enjoyable thing. I think also something that detracted from the enjoyment is that book two, especially, crossword puzzles and Judith being involved in them. She does some great sleuthing over crossword puzzles in book two, and that brought me so much enjoyment. I love the incorporation of the crossword puzzles, but this book, it felt like they were barely a footnote. They were hardly there. So I don't know how to feel about that. I feel that that needs to come back more as we go into the series again, because I really like that aspect of her character. We did dive into some other sides of her character, so maybe that's why they chose not to focus on this as much, but I was so sad that The Queen of Poisons turned out to not be as big of a hit as the previous entry in this series. So from there, I read a new release that I haven't really seen anybody talking about. It just came out last month, and I had a hold on it from the library, so I was ready when it came in. And this is The Geomagician by Jennifer Mandula. This is a debut work and the first of a duology in historical fantasy. This is Victorian era, and as you can clearly see, there are dinosaurs on here. And it's actually really cool because it's a naked hardback, but these are all embossed. You can't really see it with your eye, you can only feel it. The fossils on the cover are embossed. It's very cool. But anyway, so we're following our main character, Mary Anning, who is a real historical figure, famously known as a fossil hunter. She made some of the greatest fossil discoveries of the Victorian era, and this is very steeped in that historical era, more so than in fantasy. So geomagicians are sort of naturalists of the time who are using fossils and relics, or fossils and other items as magical implements. So they can sort of contrive magic, they can create magical items that are called relics, but not spelled like relics, which kind of got under my skin and really annoyed me. It's spelled R-E-L-I-Q rather than R-E-L-I-C. Barring the annoyance, that does become sort of clear or more clear over the course of the book, but I don't feel the magic system in this is really fleshed out or is the point of this book. It's much, much more about the grounded things that are going on. So Mary finds an egg, and it hatches and comes to life, and it's a pterodactyl. And that really brings her into the naturalist society, which is a society entirely of men. Very obviously, but she's been making all of these discoveries throughout her whole life since childhood. So we are exploring some of her real history about her father dying when she was young and her supporting her family by hunting these fossils. And that all was fascinating. I think last year read a children's biography of Mary Anning titled The Fossil Hunter. There are a load of books that have the same title all about her. So I highly recommend that you look one of those up as well. But this, other than the direct history, I think was engaging with the historical themes of both the sexism of the naturalist societies and the fact that women were not welcomed into that at all, and also the involvement of the church at the time. So there are these really strict rules about who and how you do magic, and it's very heretical to do magic in the wrong ways. And there are so many times where the men just sort of hand wave away that things they're doing are fine, even though Mary is questioning what's going on and why they're doing things in a certain way, because it seems to get into a gray area. And in fact, there are multiple points where it's very clear that if you're a man, you fall on one side, and if you're a woman doing the same thing, you may fall on the other side. And this particular quote that I'm going to read really hit home for me. It was all interpretation, not unlike geomagical scholarship, in truth. We had only these few verses, and she's talking about the Bible, scattered like bones in the cliffs, and all anyone could do was try to make sense of what they found through some combination of context, knowledge, and experience. And the interpretation could always shift with the new discoveries, or new theories, or even with popularity, with who was in favor and who was not. It was not a comforting thought. Someone, or maybe several someones, would decide my case, and they would use these verses, and my life depended on the interpretation. So she's really coming to question the fact that she's under tribunal by the religious authorities for her use of magic in this book. And it feels like there's a lack of tension or drama to that for me over the story, but there was so much there that I read into her going through this sort of oppression for both being a woman by the Naturalist Society and for being a woman who does fossil magic by the religious authority, even though she has not had any intent to do evil. It really mirrored for me the witch trials in Salem, or similar things that happened in England as well. And just the ways that the authorities look to read into things in ways that increase their power. And so I wanted this almost to be more heavy-handed, because I'm gonna say I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed the exploration of those topics. This was like a 4-star for me, and yet I feel like I have mostly critical things to say, because I was reading and I was enjoying, and I wasn't getting emotionally attached. I wasn't buying into her story or her as a character, feeling that connection with her very much, which kind of bummed me out, because I wanted to like this more than I kind of did, even though it was a very good read. So I don't know. It feels like it took a turn at the end and became immensely plotty after really there being nothing for me to grab onto. It just sort of felt like things were moving forward. I never got a sense of a why for why is all of this happening? Why is she even being included in this in the first place, in this extremely sexist setting? It felt very strange that they sort of let her follow along with this pterodactyl that has hatched and she's followed along with. And she also gets caught up with a man from her past who she had a romantic relationship, and that romance never is a really significant or major thing, but it feels like the book wants it to be a bigger thing than it really seems to be. Though I think that's prominent to the story, her connection with this man. And it was so strange because it felt like every different element of the book gets sort of cut off before we dig into it. And I think that was what kept me from really connecting as much as I would have liked, including with that relationship. We rarely see them actually converse at all. we mostly hear about what happened with them in the past because they were young first loves, basically. And then things went wrong with them, more or less. And in the course of that, him coming back into her life, he keeps trying to explain, and she keeps cutting him off and just saying, oh no, it's not a big deal. It's so long ago. And she keeps disrupting him and stopping him from ever explaining. And that feels like a metaphor for what didn't work as much for me in this book and why I didn't connect, because it just was that repeated, we're changing topics over the course of this and never diving deep into any of the individual ones. So I, at points, definitely did feel I wanted this to be a little bit more heavy in getting to the point with things. It also doesn't really explain very much of the fantastical or the magical elements. There are so many things that are really questionable that are being done, and we don't ever express that. But also, the science is kind of treated like magic as well, and I didn't like that. That I actively did not like. That there are multiple moments where she and other naturalists are sort of working together, and they're not doing it scientifically. They're sort of making guesses, and rather than collecting data and extrapolating from that data, they're just going, here's our hypothesis. And that seemed a little silly. And so that part was maybe the one thing that I actively really didn't like. But otherwise, like, this was super enjoyable to read. It felt very grounded in things I actually do know to be true of Mary Anning. And I think that if you go in expecting this to be super full of magic and dinosaurs, you'll have a much more disappointing experience than I did. I think this is predominantly about the history and has a little flair of magic and the unwieldy aspect of dinosaurs being present, to keep it a little bit fantastical, but that's not the point. I do also think that I've read Our Hideous Progeny, which is doing almost exactly the same thing as this, and I liked that one more. So that kind of tempered this as well. So I am super happy to have gotten this right off, because this was a great debut, and I am really looking forward to see what comes in the second half. Though I'm not really sure where it's going to go from the end of this one. So anyway, that was a good one. And I did also read one of my vlog books that will be coming eventually. I don't know when. So I finished another book that I won't talk about here. Other than that, I am currently actively reading role-playing. I think it's role-playing. I always want to call it the wrong thing. I think it's role-playing. A romance novel, and I'm working on Democracy Awakening. So those are the books I have in progress, and I think I probably will get into one of my horror books this week as well, because I haven't started any of them yet, and I wanted to really dive into horror this month. So that's books. As far as watching, I watched a lot, or I finished a lot. So two things that I was watching week to week as they came out. Jet Lag season 17, I thought was fantastic. So Jet Lag is a travel reality competition kind of show, but it's very small scale. Usually it's the same 3 guys, and then every once in a while they throw in a 4th person. And this one they had a 4th person. So they in teams of 2 this season took trains around Taiwan and had challenges to collect coins, and then they had to put down coins on every train station they wanted to claim in different routes to try and take over the most stations and prevent their competitors from taking over and getting more stations than them. And that works very nicely because the main routes are kind of a loop around Taiwan, around the outer edge. And so that was interesting because they were very locked in on once they got a side, or the bottom, once they got a section, it was kind of locked off for the other group until they got enough coins to overtake each other. So I felt that this season, this was the 17th season, was the strongest, or one of the strongest seasons, because they have been continually getting better at game design, and I feel the balance of things in this season was just so good, where they had a good frequency of challenges. Those challenges really did a great job of showcasing Taiwan, so they were things that felt like they were sites to see that you as a tourist would really want to go see. They were key sites that were cool, not just random things. And so it felt very unique. I felt like the chemistry between the 4 people was great. Normally you have the 3 that are the same guys, and the 4th person that they added in really fit in with that chemistry, I think, very, very well. And so this was just a real high point in terms of the balance of the game, the tension between them, I think was unusual, because I don't want to give away any gameplay stuff, but it did feel like there wasn't a lot of time at the beginning where things were tense and where there was a lot of challenge between the two of them, but that did take off in the back half of the series, really, and was very, very successful, I thought. So I have loved that, and I'm so looking forward to their next season, which is going to be, it looks like, well, I'm not going to say it, because that is something people look forward to learning about if they watch. They love the trailer for the next season dropping at the end. So if you haven't seen that, go look. Anyway, then I watched something that is maybe not my normal sort of thing. Another reality competition show, The Millionaire Secret, or The Secret Millionaire. It's one or the other, which is on Netflix. And it follows the very standard setup of like Resistance or Werewolf, or the Mole, like those odd man out who has the secret type of situations. Anyone who's in board gaming knows a billion games that are like that. And I think that I mainly just watched this for Peter Serafinowicz, because he's the host, and he's like the very buttoned up, dressed up guy at the manor house where all the people come to, and then somebody gets $1 million in their case. In this particular version, though, there's not one person through the whole thing. The $1 million can be moved around. So a lot of people, usually the first few millionaires, don't want the money to be with them. They want it out of their hands. And so that, I think, creates the best dynamic for one of these shows, though I do not actually care very much about the competition part. Like the people involved in the competition I generally don't like. And so I mainly am watching for Peter Serafinowicz, but I enjoyed it for that. And that was the only reason I really watched it. Otherwise, it was kind of dumb. So anyway, that's all I watched for ongoing shows that wrapped up this week, but I watched a bunch of movies. So last week I had watched The Lady in the Van, starring Dame Maggie Smith. And it was mentioned, oh yes, she's great in Downton Abbey. My friend Chaz mentioned that here. And so I went down a Downton Abbey rabbit hole and watched all 3 of the Downton Abbey movies, which are all available on Netflix. And I was really tempted to go back and watch the entire series as well. And I was like, no, we're going to just watch the movies, because I have never seen the newest movie. So the 3 movies, you have Downton Abbey, the movie, Downton Abbey, the New Era, and Downton Abbey, the Grand Finale. Downton Abbey, the movie, came obviously closest following the series, and it does very much feel like it follows the series. And in that one, we're following, this is obviously a historical manor house show. It's very upstairs, downstairs, exactly what you expect if you've never seen it before. But you have become attached to all of these characters, both the wealthy people who run the house and their servants over the course of the series. And then they delivered this movie as a way of sort of capping it off, but then they've continued on. And so this first movie, we're following the house as there's a royal visit to the house. And obviously that is such a big deal for everyone. And over the course of the series, and also all of these movies, we have these real elements of societal change. And I think that only grew over the course of these. So I think the first one was the weakest of the movies. The second one, we are following as Hollywood comes to Downton Abbey, basically. We're at this big period of change where silent films versus talkies is happening, and we have somebody showing up to do a silent film, and then things sort of go wrong because silent films are falling out of favor. And that is a whole great, cool historical exploration, seeing the split in how the sentiment is about these filmmakers showing up and taking over the house. The house very literally is split over this, because we have sort of the half and half. Some of the people are really put off about what's going on, about the fact that they're there, and they don't like it. And so literally half of the house sort of leaves and goes on vacation, and the other half are still there helping to make the film, helping to serve the people who are there making the film, and going gaga over famous people, basically, and making all of these connections. And I am so glad that I did watch these all together, because the third film, it takes place after a little bit of time has passed from this, but it starts with some things that happened at the end of the second movie. So it's drawing very, very direct connections, even though there are years between these two films. There's a real direct line between the ending of the second and the beginning of the third. And in this one, we do have, again, the sort of connections that were made in the second very prominently being brought up. We have a scandal in the Downton Abbey house, more or less, and the overcoming of that scandal, the changing social graces of the time in, I think, 1930s. They've been past the Depression, so we're seeing a lot of big societal moves at a micro level with this family and this house. Really interesting things, I think. So I don't feel like there's a single cohesive thread, through line through all of the movies, though I do feel like they connect, and I feel like they tell a great story of the ways that this family and this house have changed in the times with both big and small things. And the way that this third movie, I think, caps off was so interesting. It's very much about a changing of the guard, and we're seeing that over the course of this, like, it's been so amazing to watch, because we have had people on the show for, I think, more than a decade. So you have seen people literally who were starting out as young servants in the show now sort of coming into leadership roles. We've had people in the family who were basically children that are now coming into some semblance of power in the world and advocating for themselves. And yeah, it's sort of wild to have a series that has gone that long and really told that story for so long. And so this third one, I think, really capped things off very, very nicely with showing that sense of a changing of the guard. And yeah, it was just very sentimental, really, I think, to watch. And in particular, as I had said up front, I had kind of turned to this because of that mention of Maggie Smith and having not watched this final one. And watching her play this character, Violet, is so incredible. Like, she just is this perfect, like, whip smart, brash older lady who is a matriarch of this family, who is of a different time and has her own feelings about the way that society should be, and yet doesn't always fit everyone's expectations. Like, she's such a great character. Both the writing of her and the acting of her is so good. So, but that's, I feel, how this whole series is, or this whole show or movie. Everything around this world of Downton Abbey, I think, is great. So anyway, that is it. I think I talked way too long about those three, but I just love Downton Abbey so much. So as far as my week, it feels like it was another lost week, just like the previous week. But the previous week was lost in a negative way, and I was not feeling good. This week I feel like was mostly positive, and I don't really have anything of note, is all, but it was very mellow, relaxed, and all for good, mostly. There were a couple of goofy things at the shelter. Like, we had somebody get stuck out with a dog who would not come back in. And I was there and happened to be the one that found them. It was like, oh dear. And we ended up having to get a whole bunch of people to carry the dog back in, and the dog was just being difficult, just didn't want to go in. And sometimes ridiculous things like that happen. Somebody got locked in one of the outdoor pens, because we have like these enclosed pens for letting them run and play with balls and stuff. Somebody got locked in and we couldn't get it unlocked. Just a couple of ridiculous things this week. So I think that's all for my week. So my one recommendation this week is kind of an interesting one. I actually watched this on Nebula, but it should be on YouTube, so I will link it there. Tibby's, which is AKA Toby, who is a wonderful person that I know of from Jetlag, did a video about self-publishing a book, but really goes into the nitty-gritty of the numbers and why self-publishing right now is kind of broken, or is increasingly being broken, mainly to do with AI. But the book that was being published here is kind of a really niche topic, and it's not one that's going to gain, popular fame. And so going into the details of that, of doing sort of a specialty item book, was really, really intriguing and interesting. And also the pitfalls that were discovered with shipping internationally, and just unusual items that had to be troubleshot a bit through that process were really, really interesting, even as somebody who has no interest in publishing a book, but really is interested in the process of books and understanding the publishing world right now. So I thought this was a fantastic video to watch if you are a reader or someone who is going to be publishing your own book. Well worth a look. I really enjoyed it. So definitely check out that video, which I will link down below. And with that, as always, I have rambled on too much, so I will wish you a wonderful week in reading and in life, and thank you so very much for watching.